Yo, we rolling deep, let's dive into the fright. Hit that play button, we review every bite. From horror flicks that give you chills at night to games that thrill, yeah, we get it right. Remember that, step back, hold tight. We'll dissect every scare, keep the vibe right. Remember that, we're here to expose the thrills, the chills where the dark wind blows. From pixels on screens to the sound that glows. Join us forever, that's how the story goes.
Hey guys, before we get started tonight, we have a big announcement. We are excited to announce our partnership with Dubby Energy Drinks. These drinks are perfect for gym sessions, those late night movie sessions, video game sessions, or whatever you might be doing in the middle of the night, or even in the day. So if you need a quick pick-me-up, grab you a Dubby and get cracking. Don't forget to use code REMEMBERTHAT for 10% off your entire purchase. And if you guys want to reach out and contact us with a, show idea or something like that, email us at rememberthatpodcast@yahoo.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button because it helps us grow and helps us continue to do this thing we love to do. So having said that, let's get into the show. All right, guys, we're going to do a little something different this week. This week, we're going to, break down the decades of horror. We're going to talk about, what was the best decades for horror and what was the least, good decades for horror. So we're just going to get cranking, and I think Cade's got the 1930s, and he's going to start off for us. And we're just going to talk about, horror movies throughout history, man. So, Cade, kick it off for us, buddy.
Yeah, I feel honored to start this off for you guys. Obviously, the 1930s is completely distant for me. I remember some stuff about it from history class, but obviously we're coming off the Great Depression. You got Franklin D. Roosevelt mixing it up, bringing in new deals, a bunch of new stuff leading up to World War II. But we also got freaking awesome horror movies, guys. This is the start of the universal monster, icons that we all love and know dearly. Starting off with Dracula being released in 1931. This was one of the first horror movies with sound. Yeah, and of course everybody knows Dracula, how iconic it is. Previously, you had Nosferatu come out several years before this, but Dracula really set the stage with actually adding sound and several other forms of symbolism into the movie. And literally just a few months after this, we have Frankenstein come out. So literally in the same year in 1931, you have Dracula and Frankenstein release. And I mean, these guys established like well-known characters in horror that everybody knows today. And following Frankenstein, we have one of the best horror sequels of all time in The Bride of Frankenstein. One of the first horror films to blend tragedy, comedy, and humanity into the themes of the film. And so, those were some of the biggest films of the 1930s that I felt like that was worth mentioning for this show.
Cool.
That's awesome.
The 30s, man, it's going to be hard to beat them because it's just all those classic monsters. But moving on to the 40s, who has the 40s?
So I've got the 40s. So the 40s were kind of a transitional decade for horror films, while the 1930s defined the genre with the birth of those iconic universal monsters like Dracula and Frankenstein. The 40s reshaped horror in a more subtle, more psychological direction. The 40s horror landscape was shaped by two major forces. So you had World War II going on, which deeply affected public taste, budgets, and the film content, and two, changing studio priorities. So horror was no longer the top moneymaker for Universal, but smaller studios like RKO and Columbia started experimenting with new tones and ideas. Audiences living through the horrors of war grew less interested in overtly supernatural monsters and more psychological fear, paranoia, and human evil. As a result, horror evolved from instead of a gothic fantasy to a more retrospective, atmospheric, and suggestive form. So the psychological realism horror became as much about the mind as it was the monster. It went into more of a noir mystery kind of ghastly subjects there. And then you give birth to the monster crossover concept, like Universal mashups, Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. They were trying to milk some more money out of those big franchises that came out of the 30s. So for me, the 40s was more of a finding their footing. They didn't really know where they fit during that decade, but some big ones to look at. There was the original Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the 30s, but they remade it in the 40s because it did follow that psychological noir mystery type aspect. You have the Body Snatcher and Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, like I mentioned.
Cool. Interesting.
The professor dropping knowledge.
Say, I
Man.
That's
expect
right,
nothing
man. The
less.
professor.
I like it,
straight
dude.
up dropping
Good
knowledge.
job, Bryson.
Good job, man. All right, moving on to to that golden era of the 50s. Let's hear it. Who's got the 50s?
So I got the 1950s, and I'm just gonna go ahead and give the three movies here for the 50s. You've got The Creature from the Black Lagoon come out in 1954, and it's another one of the classic Universal monsters. I recently actually went to go see this film that was re-released in the theater, and it was in 3D, and it was super, super cool. That kind of goes along with what Bryson was saying with how movies were starting to evolve. They were starting to use a little bit different techniques and whatnot. There's also a few other things that I wanted to get into with that. But you've got House on Haunted Hill, which is
a great
Vincent
movie.
Price movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Vincent Price was horror.
Still
what Bela
is horror, in my
Lugosi-
opinion. Yeah.
That's right. What Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff and Lon Chaney Jr. did for horror in the 1930s and 40s, Vincent Price really took up the torch and carried it on through the 50s and 60s. So 1959 was House on Haunted Hill, and then we have The Horror of Dracula. And The Horror of Dracula is 1958 film that stars Christopher Lee as his first feature film with as playing Dracula. So basically, Christopher Lee was Dracula probably more times than what anybody else was. He was in several films, and he started doing all of the Hammer films. And Hammer was a company back in the big in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They were huge into horror movies, but Christopher Lee is definitely probably my favorite Dracula of all time.
I like him better as a werewolf hunter myself.
Exactly.
Well, he definitely plays werewolf hunter good too. But moving up from the 50s, I do want to say about the 50s is it's post wartime, and so we were nuclear in the end of World War II, and so America in general had a lot of fear of scientific stuff, kind of a nuclear holocaust type thing. And what was coming out during that time was a lot of science fiction movies. You had a lot of movies about aliens, and it was like a alien takeover, this and that. So aside from all that, the three movies I named in the 50s, those were, you do a Google search and those three are definitely going to come up. But you move from the 50s, I also have the 60s. And the 60s is where horror really started to push things. Okay, so in 1960, you've got the first slasher, which is Norman Bates. And if Alfred Hitchcock hadn't have been so impressed with Vincent Price on House on Haunted Hill, he drew a lot of influence from that movie. And so if we didn't have House on Haunted Hill in the 50s, then we wouldn't have had Psycho in the 60s. So that's probably the biggest one. Night of the Living Dead in 1968 was one of the first, if not the first, zombie movies. And so now you've went from your black and white classic horror monsters to now you've got a black and white zombie that's actually eating a dead body part. I remember the zombie actually picking up a hand and eating this hand. So Hollywood is really starting to push the boundaries and push the limits at this point. And so then, even further, pushing the envelope even further, you've got 1968 Rosemary's Baby, which now
good
you've started
movie.
to push it in the direction of a religious tone. There's a direct evil involved. So you can kind of tell going from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and now we're up into the 60s. We're really starting to push the envelope, and then whoever has the 70s is really going to have a good time with it. So I'll go ahead and let whoever has that take off.
So I have the 1970s. So the 1970s saw the rise of what I call modern horror. These films were more gritty and realistic. So think of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, gritty, realistic horror. I love it. The slasher became more mainstream with movies like Halloween, and religious horror took off with the movies such as The Exorcist. A lot of these movies had symbolic themes, and they were commentaries of the times, such as movies like Alien and Jaws. And so I obviously have the three movies. There's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, came out in 1974. Not the first slasher, but one of the first, and super disturbing even today. The Exorcist, 1973.
That movie
Yeah, scares people to this, still scares people to
scars
this
me for
day.
life.
Religious horror, all the way. It's the most famous religious horror movie of all time, I would say. And really dives deep into the symbolism and symbols of the time. And then you've got Halloween 1978, which is the most famous slasher movie of all time. Changed the horror genre and really changed the tone to the 1980s. Like it really changed the way that we look at horror. So the 1970s, a fantastic year for horror movies.
And again, coming off the 60s, it's still pushing the envelope. So you're still pushing it. 70s was a huge transition.
Oh yeah,
That's what I love about horror movies is they keep transitioning in each decade. They keep pushing those envelopes. They keep creating these new contents.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly right. And I guess everybody can figure I have the 1980s, which in my opinion
Let's
is
go,
the
Corky.
greatest decade for horror that has ever been created. Now,
I don't know.
the 70s done a lot for horror, not taking nothing away from the 70s. The 70s did create the slasher genre with Halloween 1978. But the 80s is referred to as the golden age of the slasher film. Now, Halloween started it, but the 80s finished it. You feel me? So in the 80s, you got to look at the iconic slashers that came out of the 80s. You have Jason Voorhees. You have Freddy Krueger. They list, Pinhead, Chucky. It became the decade of the slasher. The 80s also had, three big points that, help it define, move horror into another direction. I just mentioned that it was referred to as the golden age of the slasher film. It was also the golden age of practical effects, and the gore revolution happened in the 80s. And that's when, films just started showing blood and guts, and just they just basically started pushing the boundaries everywhere they could push them in the 80s. They would make a movie and would even have to trim stuff back just to get it off of an X rating so they could get it into the theaters with an R rating and stuff like that. So you had, people like Tom Savini and other practical effect masters doing their thing in the 80s. And 80s is also known as, the practical effects and gore revolution. Now, you also had, again, with, Halloween in 1978, they started the final girl, theme thing going with Halloween. But again, the 80s took it to another level and kind of finished it. That's where every movie in the 80s had a final girl. That's just basically what the 80s was known for. Slashers, final girls. So that's another thing the 80s had going for it. And the last thing the 80s had was it was also the rise of home video. The 80s is starting to where normal people could afford to buy a VHS tape and watch it at home. So unlike the 50s, 60s, and 70s, if you were watching a movie, it was either going to come on TV with your rabbit ears or you were going to go to the theater and watch it. The 80s was the first time in history where you could go to your local rental store and rent a movie of your choice, a horror movie, and take it home and start experiencing that whole sitting on the couch with the lights off, watching Freddy Krueger, watching Jason Voorhees, watching, whoever it is you're watching, and, having that experience in the home instead of the theater. So with all that going on, 80s was a just epic decade for the horror genre. Now,
That
Well
changed
said.
everything.
Well said, Corky.
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah. Now, moving on from the 80s, we're going to go into the 90s real quick. Now, I'm going to be straight with everybody here. I don't have a lot to say about the 90s. I really think horror as a genre nearly died in the 90s.
Oh, I don't know.
Well, now let me.
That's a hot take, Corky.
Now,
That is a hot take.
We'll debate on the
there's not
second half
much
of the
for
show.
horror in the 90s until when Scream came out. If the movie Scream, now hear me out with this. Scream is one of the best horror movies ever made. I love that movie. They copied a lot from Psycho with killing the main antagonist or the main, girl in the first part of the movie. But Scream saved that decade as far as horror goes, in my opinion. If we don't have Scream in the 90s, I don't think we have much to go on in that other than just a bunch of stupid B movies. So
The Leprechaun, man.
You got Silence of the
my
Lambs.
point. That's my
It's
point.
one of the best.
Now,
Silence of the Lambs.
we
Just
can
some
discuss
90s
this,
in here.
Brent, but I don't call Silence of the Lambs a horror movie. That's a true crime movie, in my opinion. Hannibal Lecter and all that.
I know y'all
Okay.
talked about
Okay.
that
We'll
before I came
definitely
on
have a
board.
lot
We
to
can
discuss on the
discuss it. We can
second.
discuss
on the
it.
second.
We'll definitely discuss it on the last
Now,
half of the show.
like I said, I'm going to give the 90s. You've heard what I've got to say about it. Not much to say about with horror with the 90s. Without Scream, I don't even think the 90s lands on the charts anywhere for horrors. Now, we'll move on for that. Who has the 2000s?
That will be me.
Shade.
Coming in here finally, guys, a decade that I was alive in. I'm so excited to talk about this. So obviously me and Brent were both born in 2000, so this is huge for us. But the 2000s, while it wasn't as impactful as some like the 1970s or the 1980s, I feel like there were some decent horror films that scarred me as a young child. Starting first with the horror movie that introduced cursed videotapes, The Ring, back in 2002. Man, I hope we cover this one day. This movie introduced Japanese horror to the U.S., bringing in a lot of different artistic styles and filmmaking strategies that just made an awesome movie. Um, The Ring was one that I remember really, really well. Another one that I love so much is 28 Days Later. I know that
Great movie.
Corky's a big
Yes.
zombie guy. I feel like 28 Days Later, sort of rejuvenated the zombie movie franchise, just making zombie movies in general, and started the show. Obviously we watched Return of the Living Dead. We saw some intelligent, fast-moving zombies, but 28 Days Later showed a different side of the zombies, like really, grotesque and infectious and super fast-moving zombies that inspired stuff like, some of my favorite video games like The Last of Us that came out like several years later, but absolutely love 28 Days Later. We also had a ton of stuff such as found footage movies. This is when this was just huge, man. We had the Blair Witch Project come out, I think maybe 1999, close to 2000, so I'll consider it 2000. But also Paranormal Activity. I was probably 6 or 7 years old when Paranormal Activity came out, and I legitimately thought it was real. Like nobody told me otherwise.
I thought it
And
was
my
real too.
Yeah,
and my
Paranormal
and my
Part One.
cousins, yeah, dude, it was
Yeah.
part one. Obviously they made some sequels that were starting to stretch. They were trying to build a franchise. Whatever. But when that movie ended, and obviously you see how it ended with the wife doing her thing, but it left a note saying that like she was like walking around like no one knew where she was. Like I was sitting there as like a 7-year-old, like, bro, where's the SWAT team in the army? Like
Yeah.
this lady, so she's gonna kill people. So for me, you know, I was a big chicken growing up, and I'm glad that I'm able to now watch horror movies, talk about it with you guys, because the 2000s for me was such a big decade for me in terms of horror. So that's 2000s for you guys.
Awesome.
Sweet.
Who has the 2010s?
I got the
The
2010s.
professor with the 2010s. Let's hear it, buddy.
So the 2010s will be the last decade that we have to touch because we're still in the 2020s. We can't review that quite yet as a decade.
No, I've got
But
the
the 20,
2020s, Bryson.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
Brent's got he's got 5 years.
Yeah.
right. So the 2010s were one of the most exciting, transformative decades in horror history. It was a time when the genre gained renewed mainstream respect. So in the 2000s, there were a lot that the 2000s gave us, but it started to die off a little bit when it came to things being more serious. They got a little bit funny. You know, you look at Cabin Fever, movies like that. Um, but it started to gain some mainstream respect. It expanded globally and it evolved into new forms of social commentary, artistic expression, and emotional storytelling. So the decade saw the rise of elevated horror, which is considered smart, character driven, artfully made horror. It was a boom in independent studios like A24, Blumhouse, and Neon, shift toward real world anxieties like trauma, grief, class, technology, and race. The resurgence of international horror. So, a lot of international horror started to really boom again. I'm a huge fan of 1970s horror films, like foreign horror films. But the 2010s started to give us a lot more content. Audiences and critics began to take horror seriously again, for both its artistry and its social relevance. So the 2010s, it was cultural legitimacy. Horror became Oscar worthy. You had Get Out, that was Oscar worthy, Hereditary, and The Witch. It had a lot of emotional depth. It had that trauma, that grief, identity replaced monsters and slashers. A24 and the resurgence. So it recentered horror around an artistic, risk taking way of making these movies. You went in such a passion project. It had such focus and drive towards the idea of the movie that you didn't really know if the audience was going to see your vision in it. You look at the 80s, they followed a structural script because they knew it was successful. The 2010s started giving us movies that broke out of those scripts because they only wanted to bring on screen what they felt like was the story they wanted to tell. Um, so you had a lot of nostalgia too. You did have a lot of reboots. You had a lot of legacy sequels. But you had the return of the witch, the cult, and folktale horror. So a sentence for the 2010s is horror grew up, turning
I
from
like
blood and
that.
guts to
I
mind
like
and
that.
meaning, from cheap thrills to cultural chills. So some movie examples from the 2010s,
Man, the
you have
professor is
Hereditary.
spitting out bars right
You
now.
got
Yeah,
away with
Shit.
yeah.
words, man. I'm
Well,
just sitting here in awe
straight.
listening.
I
Straight
love the
poetry.
2010s. They
Straight
it gave a
poetry.
lot to the horror industry because you did start to see a lot of repetitiveness after the 80s because of how successful the 80s was. People kept writing that same structure that they knew was successful. But the 2010s broke us out of that. And some movies that I wanted to have as an honorable mention out of the 2010s were Hereditary, Midsummer, and Train to Busan,
Nice,
which goes
Bryson.
back into some of that like foreign horror that came out and the indie resurgence of different companies.
Awesome.
Midsommar is a
I
good
loved it.
So
mention.
Awesome job
that's
as
the
usual,
2010s.
Professor.
Well, I loved
Thank
that.
That
So I do have the 2020s. Dad, what were you saying?
Oh, I was just gonna say that was like straight, like sermon.
Yeah.
Like
I know.
I love
know,
it.
it
I
was
know.
really good.
It was great.
It
Yeah,
changed your
great.
life, man.
we
That
just went to
changed your
Shout out-
life.
stuff in here.
Shout out to Bryson, man. He
Yeah,
did
we
that.
did.
Thank- thank-
Bryson's fantastic, dude.
The
But yeah, that was
professor
I'll drink to
at
that.
work.
yeah. But it was a great that was a great analysis of the 2010s. So I do have the 2020s, which some people may wonder, why are we doing the 2020s if it's only 2025? I just thought let's get some positive let's be optimistic with how horror is going. I think that the 2020s are positive for the horror
Oh, for sure.
decade. So, like Bronson said, by the end of the 2010s, horror movies took a shift to focus more on social commentaries like they once did in the 70s and beyond. And if you guys know me, like that's the type of horror that I love, is when it takes that deeper, when it goes below surface level and it actually starts making you think. That's when horror works for the best for me. And you saw that a lot in the 2010s with The Witch, which is one of my favorite horror movies, Hereditary, which is one of my favorite horror movies, Midsummer. Like, they had some great movies at the end of the 2010s. The 2020s have largely followed this trend, but it has added its own twist. Instead of the gritty, realistic horror that the 1970s produced, the 2020s have focused on a comedic trend in its horror movies, largely while doing social commentary. One movie that does not fit this mold is a movie called Civil War. It's not an actual horror movie, but I will say it is the most horrifying, and I'm not kidding when I say this, it's the most horrifying movie I've seen in theaters, and the most disturbing movie I've seen in theaters. So I would put it as a horror movie for me personally.
Oh, I need
It
to
is
check
very
that out.
disturbing.
Yeah,
It will.
I've never
it
seen that,
will-
dude.
It
Oh,
will creep you out.
It's very disturbing. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Civil War are the only two movies that I've watched that actually scared me when I saw it. But so the Civil War, its focus on realistic battlefields forced the viewer into the world of that movie. On the other hand, the 2020s have seen a rise in bringing back the vintage vampires with movies like Sinners, Abigail, and Nosferatu. And vintage style slashers, going back to your retro nostalgic slashers with Terrifier and the X trilogies.
Yeah.
Since this decade is only half over, I can only hypothesize how the remaining 5 years will go. My hypothesis is extremely optimistic for the horror genre. Though I
Yep.
believe the comedic trend to last into the future, sadly, I do believe horror movies will continue to be more symbolic, and they will continue to pose difficult questions to the viewers, just like all of the classic horror movies did, like our favorites, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like The Exorcist, like Halloween. I believe studios such as A24 and Neon will continue to find innovative directors that will try genuinely new ways to change the horror genre for the better. Some of these changes won't work, but just maybe one of these changes will find our generation Psycho, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, or Scream. And so my movies for the 2020s, the X trilogy. So I kind of cheated because I put a trilogy here, but the X trilogy, which is X, Pearl, and Maxine, 2022, 2022, and 2024. Civil War, 2024, and Long Legs, 2024.
Long
Well said,
legs.
Brent.
Nice. Well said, Brent.
Yeah, good job,
Nice,
buddy.
man.
So, that's that's a little rundown of all the decades, everybody. So I think what we're going to do now is, how did we want to do this, guys? Was we going to rank the decades? Is that what we're going to do?
Well,
Yeah,
so I
let's
think
each do our personal.
I think what we
Go
well,
ahead, Dad.
since there's so many decades, there's like 10 decades, right? Somewhere around in there.
Yeah.
Since there's so many decades, I do have a personal list, but after hearing some of you guys talk, my list is now changed.
It
But
has. Me too.
But it's going to take some rearranging. So I think what we need to do is we need to hash out what Remember That podcast ranks all of this stuff, and
Okay.
we take what we have talked about. Everybody brings it to the table. We'll hash out. If we can only get, a top 5, then we can only get a top 5. But
No, we
I
gotta
think
rank. We gotta rank the whole. We got to rank the whole thing. Come on, let's rank the whole
Well,
thing.
if we can make it, because what we're going to start doing is we're going to start debating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so remember that podcast has to get, a consensus on how this stuff's going. So I'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Corky made a very valid point with the 1980s. I actually had the 1980s as my number 2. My number 1 was the 70s, and it wasn't because of what 80s horror. It wasn't because of what 80s horror did for the decade, even though that's a valid point. I was really rating it just based off of the movies that we saw. After what Corky was talking about, he's got a valid point for number 1. But as far as the movies that I consider in my top horror movies, I'm going to say my number 1 is going to be the 1970s. How many people oppose me?
I agree 100%.
I knew Corky.
That's my number 1.
So Corky disagrees, but I had the 70s as number 1 for me.
Bryson, what have you got for your number 1?
I have the 70s.
The 70s? Okay, so I said
So
70s.
let's talk about
Bryson
this for a minute.
70s.
What?
Okay, all right.
No,
Bring it,
and I
bring
don't totally disagree with you because the 70s is a great decade for horror. But what movies came out in the 70s that makes you think that it's obviously I think the 80s are number 1. So what movies come out other than Texas Chainsaw Massacre? We got one banger. So what else you got?
Yes.
Wait.
Wait.
No, let me take this. Let me take
Who do
this.
you
Let
want
me
to
take
field the
this.
question?
Let
Who
me
do you
take
want to
this.
field the question?
Well, whoever. I mean, I know we've got
Let
movies
me
like
take. I talked about it, so let me take it.
Listen.
All
I know
right,
we've got
go ahead,
movies
Brent.
like Suspiria, and we've got all these. There was some great Italian horror, whatever they're from, and all that good stuff.
Yes.
But they're
All
not.
the
But they're
giallo
not
Italian.
mainstream movies.
Oh,
Okay.
you're missing some,
So-
Corky.
Okay. So
Well,
so
fill
you
me
said
in.
so you said
Fill
not
me
the
in.
so you said not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is my favorite movie of all time. That's
listen,
a huge
that's a movie
huge
on its
gap
own.
of
Yeah.
but The Exorcist, 1973,
Oh God,
changed the
forgot
horror
about that
genre.
one. All right, hold on. Forgot.
Halloween, 1978, changed the horror genre, started the slasher. Jaws, 1975.
See, I
Oh,
don't count.
yeah.
Jaws is not a horror movie.
Started
I'm
it-
sorry.
Ah,
Jaws
it's
is not a horror
horror.
movie.
It's horror.
What?
Bruce.
Jaws
That
is
is
not
horror.
a horror movie. It's
Yes,
a suspense
that is a
thriller.
horror
It's
movie.
not a horror movie. I'm sorry.
Aliens. Alien, another
Yes,
movie.
is
Alien
not
was
a horror movie.
Alien is my favorite horror movie of all time. It is
Alien,
sci-fi
Alien
horror.
is not a horror
So
movie.
all the movies that start to push it over, it's
Alien-
not
Alien-
horror anymore.
Alien
What
is
about the
sci-fi. Jaws
So unless
is
it's a
a
guy,
suspense
so unless
thriller.
it's a guy who
somebody's
carries a
chest
knife around,
explode.
unless it's a
Man.
movie, unless it's a
Face
movie that
huggers?
shows a knife wielding maniac killing
The
people, it's
Exorcist,
not a
The
horror movie.
Exorcist never stabbed anybody with a knife, and that's a horror movie.
Me and
But
Bryson
Jaws
sitting
is-
back here eating popcorn,
Okay.
y'all. We're
Okay,
like,
okay,
"What
okay.
it is?"
Jaws is a big fish movie it is. It's a thriller. It's
big
not
fish.
scary. You know?
Hold on, Corky. What about the face hugger from Alien? You're telling me that's not
Yes,
horror?
Alien is
Alien is a
scary,
sci-fi movie. It's not horror. I'm sorry, it's not.
I'm
But
done
you
with
can
you.
have
Well, then
I'm
you'll have
done
horror.
with
Then
you.
you'll have to take like half of the 1950s
But
out
I will
if you don't
say
count
this.
Alien as horror.
I'll say this: throwing Alien aside and Jaws, valid points. 70s could very well be number 1, but so I'm
Dang it.
outranked.
I just
70s is
a
number
horror
1.
movie.
All right,
I just
so
bought the
remember
new
that
Alien video
podcast.
game too. I'm offended.
I
Remember
love
that
Alien.
podcast is
Hey,
going-
Cade, don't get it twisted. I love Alien, bro. I do love it. But it's not horror. It's not.
Yes. You're crazy. You're crazy.
So
Hey, let's
all right.
focus on the positive. So the Remember
Yeah,
That
hold
up.
podcast
Hold up.
has got the
In my-
1970s as the top rated decade for horror.
In
It's
my
great. It's a
opinion,
great start.
in my opinion, what makes the 1970s the top rated is the 3 movies that we talked about. And it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Exorcist, and Halloween.
Enough said. I can't
There
argue
you
with
go.
that a bit because those 3 movies done more for horror than any horror movie that's came along. I'll shut up.
Yeah.
I can't argue that. I can't argue it.
Yeah, they push the boundaries, man.
Now-
Especially The Exorcist, dude.
Now,
my
for
number
number
two, Brent, if you want to fight me, my number 2 is going to be the 80s.
Yeah, 80s
I
has
have
got
the
to be
80s
number
as-
2.
I have the 80s as number 2.
Yeah.
Same for
Okay.
me.
All right.
Yep.
Okay.
Same
I
for
think
me.
we
So
can
now
all
we got-
agree on that. Yeah.
Who's keeping track of this?
I got my Excel spreadsheet pulled up, so I'll do it.
Cade, pull
All
up the
right.
spreadsheet,
with the
buddy.
spreadsheet.
I got you. I
Yeah.
got you
Now-
guys.
Now that we've got the heavy hitters out of the way, because I knew that the 70s and 80s would be a big showdown for number 1 and 2. Now's when it's gonna get fun. Because now, what do you go with? Do you go with classic?
Man, y'all gonna have to
Are
make
you
me
looking-
crack. Y'all gonna have to make me crack a W energy drink here in a minute, man. It's getting live in here.
Yeah, shut up.
Yeah, man.
All right, well, let me say who I put as number 3, and then that may be a good starting point. Maybe.
All right, go ahead.
I put the 1990s as my third favorite horror genre
Yes.
decade,
Yes.
and because with the
Based
1990s,
on-
I totally disagree. I'll get to it. I totally disagree with Corky that the 1990s has Scream and that's it. That is
Or name
that's almost
something
blasphemous.
else. Name something else.
Leprechaun.
Okay.
I got you. I got you.
You've got
So you've got Misery, It, Tremors, Jacob's Ladder,
Yeah,
Frankenhooker,
Tremors,
Two
man.
Evil
That's
Eyes,
Frankenhooker.
Silence of the Lambs, Arachnophobia,
huge.
Dead Alive, Blair Witch Project,
That's
Sixth
funny.
Sense, Audition. I can keep going.
Okay.
yeah.
Now y'all gonna get mad at me now, but see, I don't consider Misery horror. And what was the other
What
one?
do
we
you
said?
mean?
It's
you
a
talking
dude
about?
tied to a bed woman. It's
That's
Silence- you said-
horrifying.
it's suspense.
You said
thriller.
Silence
It's
of the
not horror.
Lambs.
Silence of the
You
Lambs.
said
is not
Silence of the
Silence of the
horror.
Lambs is not horror.
It's
Silence of the
gotta
Lambs
have
is one
a
of the
knife and a
best-
mask, dude.
It's just not.
Silence of the
Corky.
Lambs is one
Silence
of the best horror
Lambs
movies
is
of all
not
time.
scary. It's a freaking FBI movie. It's not a scary
Silence of the
movie.
Lambs. It's a comedy.
It's not a comedy, but it's not a horror.
So you had-
I mean,
On the
So-
Rams still
You had
screaming.
a lot of-
celebrities.
The 90s
that's
was a
probably
melting
very
pot of a lot of
unpopular
different
opinion,
ideas
and I know
going
I'm
on.
gonna catch some crap about that, but I don't call it horror. I don't.
The 90s was a melting pot of a lot of different
The
ideas.
'90s
that were
was
going
trash. That's all I'll say.
You had
Oh, I was born in the 90s. I'm not
What
Jewish.
about-
I was in high
You
school
had-
in the '90s. They were trash. The '90s was trash.
you
Hey,
had
I was born in 1999. Okay,
Hey,
I know
did
Kate
Child's
said
Play come out
2000,
in
but I was
the
born in
90s?
1999.
The first Chucky movie, did that come out in the
it
90s?
was 87.
No.
87.
Dang it.
But one thing I wanted to add to
Um,
Brosnan though is you mentioned Blair Witch Project. You can't
Huge
pass that up.
movie.
Like I
No,
know
that's
it's
a
a
good movie.
controversial.
Huge.
I know it's a
I love that
controversial
movie.
movie. Some people
That
hate
actually
it. Some people.
that
but-
actually knocked Halloween off from being the number 1 independent horror film ever.
Yeah,
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 the
and
Blair
you
Witch
can't
Project.
Huge
like
indie
it
movie, dude.
started the found footage.
yeah. That
movie.
was the first
So-
one, so that was an epic movie, and
Yep.
doing something different. That's what that movie did. And I'll tell you guys what, I went to the theater thinking that was real back in the day. So I had the true experience of the Blair Witch Project. Because when it came
it's
out,
like
dude,
me when I was
nobody
6
knew.
years old.
Yeah, when it came out,
Watching
dude, they
Train on Mike
marketed that
TV.
sucker as true
They-
found footage. They
They
wouldn't
did.
let they wouldn't let the actors do interviews
Dude.
or anything like that. It was crazy.
Y'all
Right,
are,
we were.
y'all are so lucky, man. Y'all are so lucky.
you've
to see
got-
this stuff.
You've got
in
that.
the
You've
day.
got the Blair Witch Project. You've got Scream. You have Silence of the Lambs. That's a huge top 3 right there. plus
John
It.
Goodman with Arachnophobia. I mean, come on. Every time he was on
That-
screen, he had his own theme song.
That's more of a comedy, though. I wouldn't call that horror.
I considered
No,
that a
if you're
comedy
scared
myself,
of
but
spiders, it's so
I'm not.
creepy.
I'm not saying that they're bad movies. I'm just saying that those movies don't hit like the movies from the 70s and 80s and even
Well, that's
the
why
60s.
it's not 1 or 2.
Look,
You
Hey,
know,
is that
even the 60s.
is that Hellraiser too?
Let me
as
tell
well?
you why the
Hellraiser
90s
in the
suck.
90s?
Let me
No,
tell you why the
Hellraiser
90s
was
suck.
80s.
Halloween H2O. That's why the 90s suck right there.
You had a resurgence or the attempt of a resurgence of the slasher, but the slasher had this whole 90s vibe and it turned
Yeah.
into a
It did.
whodunit. Okay?
Yeah,
It
okay.
did.
It was a whodunit. You had movies like I Know What You Did Last Summer,
Which was a
a
scream
whodunit.
comedy.
So-
Let's be straight about it.
a Scream, and
Yeah.
you had
All right.
Scream, which was a whodunit. You know
So
what I mean?
as the designated spreadsheet guy, so we can go on with the list. Are we saying the 90s is the number 3 spot. It sounds like we got Brent. Who's
not
voting
saying
for the
it.
90s?
I put
Okay,
the 90s
who's voting
dead
for
last.
the 90s? Oh God.
I,
Okay, so we
the
got Brent and Bryson
90s.
saying the 90s are it. I put the 30s as number 3. I'll be honest.
I would go with the 30s more than I would go with the
That's fair.
90s.
Yes.
That's
If
fair.
you didn't have
I have
the classic Universal
Yeah,
monster
just so we
movies,
get the Universal guys.
have
in
the-
there.
you wouldn't
I
have
have the
you wouldn't
30s
have-
as number 4, so I would be fine moving it up to number 3.
Okay. So I will put that as number 3 for us, and that gets us on to another controversial take because we've all talked about the 90s so much. The 90s was my number 4 spot.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
then let's put
Okay.
the 90s at number 4. I think that'd be fine.
Daniel's shaking his head. I think maybe,
I don't
but
think,
maybe
I
me,
don't think it makes number 4.
but me, Brent.
I
I
don't
think
think
me,
it ma-
Brent, and Bryson say it's
unless
4
you
though.
have
If you-
a great reason. No, we don't have to prove anything. We have the majority
No,
here.
what-
So
what
unless
I'm bringing my proof.
unless
I'm
you
bringing
have
my
a good-
proof.
unless you
Oh,
have a good
God.
reason. Unless
I've
you
got
have
a good dang reason. I've
Okay,
got a
Let's
good
hear it,
dang
Daniel.
reason.
Let's
How
hear
about
it.
the 90s
The-
suck?
the
That's
not-
why.
The 1960s brought Psycho, which was
Amen.
the original slasher.
Amen. Yep.
Okay, it brought Night of the Living Dead, which was the original zombie movie.
The Twilight Zone.
It brought Rosemary's Baby, which
Alfred
was
Hitchcock.
it was
I don't
it
know
was
what he was.
before come out before The Exorcist. So those 3 movies alone, okay, is better than 90% of every
The
90s
entire
movie
decade
that
of
you
the 90s.
that you've named.
So
They
Those
hit
are valid
I'll
harder.
say
points.
this.
They're better movies.
Those are valid points. Daniel.
1960s was number 4 on my list. So if the 1960s were to go number 3 and push my 90s down, that's all right. I'll take the 60s as number 3.
Well, no, because
'cause
3 is
'cause
already
it was my number 4.
Yeah, three we have is the 30s right now.
it's the
and we have-
30s.
Oh,
So
right,
three-
right. And if the
And so
60s
number
were to
4
take number 4, that'd be all right.
I will say
going
this.
I'm going 60s as number 4.
Same.
I will
let me-
say this.
Same.
I think Daniel brings up some great points as to what gets introduced to us first, especially with Psycho. I feel like that's
Well-
a huge
Night of the
pivotal
Living
moment in
Dead.
horror. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the 1960s, and you know that Psycho is one of my favorite movies. I will say this: I have the 2010s ranked higher than the 1960s,
Ooh.
and so,
Dude.
because no, let's
Dude.
think about it. Let's think about it. Just the movies that I mentioned,
Hereditary.
the 2010s: Hereditary, The Witch,
Yeah.
Midsummer.
If you haven't
Man,
seen
I
The
mean,
Witch,
The
Witch-
man, that movie
Witch,
scared the
I
crap out of
I
me.
knew it was the goat the whole time. I knew
But it was
the
so
goat
scary,
the whole
dude.
time.
That movie was awful. It was
I
so
said
scary.
they
I've
turned
got
on the
the-
witch, man. We rented the witch. They turned the witch on, and as soon as the goat come in the frame, I said, "That's the bad guy. That's the devil. That's goat, man. It's the
I've
goat."
got the 2020 or the 2010s as my number 5, and it was a toss up between the 60s and the 2010s. What was going to be number 4? So the
So I
2010s
think-
hit my number 5.
I think what we should do is put the 90s as our 4 spot, since we have the majority, and then we can debate about the 60s and the 2010s. Why are we?
I
why are
thought
we
that I
giving,
changed everybody's
why are
mind
we?
about the
Why are we
60s.
giving? Why are we?
Why are
pushing
you going
back
back?
our- let's not push back anything. Let's do
Why-
the
why
90s.
you-
It's number 4, and then we can
I-
have a real debate about the 60s.
You
and
know,
the,
I,
Cade-
I knew this
Cade
was gonna
and-
be.
Cade and Bryson already changed their mind.
The
You
90s
are
is
4
known
to
as the
1.
decade when the horror died, Brent. It really is,
Okay.
man. There's
Okay,
nothing in that decade.
as the designated Excel spreadsheet guy here, I'm gonna say, because we have to move on to the next number in this list here, and we can maybe come back. I think Daniel makes great points. I didn't think about
Sure.
some of the movies he
Sure.
brought up. I kind of feel like the 60s were really iconic for horror, and that's probably deserving of the 4th spot. Because you got to think, we got 70s, 80s, and then we go back to the 30s with our Universal monsters, and now we're at the 60s. So we're at the pinnacle.
Yeah.
We're starting to get into some slasher movies. I think that's probably a pretty good top 4.
Yeah, I got you.
I don't know
That
what y'all
sounds
think.
about right.
I'm down.
all right.
As much
So-
as Brent's
so where
sitting
we
there.
So now we're
I
working
know
on
Brent's-
number five.
Brent's gonna- yes,
We're at
I know.
number five.
So the reason
So we
the reason
go-
I'm sitting here like this is because I know that the 2010s is just going to keep getting pushed down.
No,
And I
hold
can
up,
see
man.
Dad.
Hold
I
on.
can see Dad. I can see
hold
Dad
up.
right over here, just like
The 2010s
No.
are better than the 90s. I can promise you that much.
So far, we've got number 1 is the 70s, number 2 is the 80s.
Yes, sir.
Number 3
That's right.
was the
30s.
30s.
30s,
Number
Number
4
4
is
is
the
the
60s.
60s.
So number
All right.
5.
Okay. Number 5.
Let's say
do you-
2010s for number 5.
I
That's
got
what I'll
2010
say.
at number 5.
I concur.
I
Okay.
will not
Yeah.
argue with that. We'll put
right.
2010s as number
Okay.
5.
Let's do it.
That was very.
So,
I'm
the
very
professor
proud of
has
you guys.
spoken.
We have Bryson here who's got us all coming together because I was afraid that Brent was going to jump through his phone and punch his dad there for a second.
Dude,
We'll move on
man,
to number 6.
me and Bryson, I was popping some popcorn. Me and Bryson were going to watch this showdown between you three when we were talking about the 70s or the 80s,
Oh, look.
whatever that was.
Yeah.
Look, and
No,
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
we're having
Corky
no-
didn't think
we're
Aliens a horror movie. That's some BS.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
That would
Listen,
kill me, though,
and
like-
I love Alien. I used to walk around and act like I was
freaking
playing.
love that movie, dude.
But it's not a. I listen.
It's one of my
I
favorite movies of
never,
all time.
never considered Alien a horror movie. I've never considered it a horror
Dude,
movie. It's a sci-fi movie.
That breaks my heart. Okay, that breaks
no,
my
man,
heart.
listen here.
I got nothing
I
but
got-
love
I
for
gotta move
Alien,
on.
man.
I got to move on. I've
So,
said
so,
my.
so
so
let me say this. It took me 2 years to convince my fiance that Godzilla is considered a monster movie. It is a creature feature. It exists within the horror. That's why I'm able to put my Godzilla stuff up in my house with our horror collection.
Congratulations
So
on
it
winning
took-
that
it took me
argument,
2
brother.
years to
Hey,
convince
good
her.
job.
Congrats.
Nice.
So
Nice.
we can go into the 1950s and transition into some 1950s because that's when Godzilla came out. But for me, you have creature features, you've got sci-fi horror, like you have all of your subcategories of the horror genre,
Yeah.
and Alien fits snugly right into that sci-fi.
See,
horror.
when you
Like-
say Gojira, I say sci-fi. I'll never say horror when it comes to Godzilla.
It's a creature feature.
I
That's a
get
creature
what
feature.
you're saying. I just we gonna have to agree to disagree on that, my man. You feel me? I just don't.
Let's think
So-
about it this way: you're on your way to the market. You're going to go buy some fish, and you're going to go buy all the groceries you need for your family. And all of a sudden, everybody starts
giant
running,
lizard.
and you looked up, and there's a 50-foot
Okay.
lizard
Exactly.
blowing
Yeah,
fire
okay,
on a building.
Corky,
That's
go
scary,
watch-
dude. Like,
Go watch Godzilla -1. Go watch Godzilla -1. That movie is a little scary. I will say.
That's scary,
that's
dude.
a
You looked
Japanese.
up and
That's a
see
good
that.
Japanese
That's-
Let me-
Godzilla movie.
you're
let
done.
let me think about this for a minute. I just I'm trying to
Corky's
figure
only
out
afraid
why.
of people in masks with knives.
I know.
Is that bad though? Because
I
maybe
thought,
I'm
I thought that Dad was.
stereotypical.
I thought Dad was
Man,
bad.
It can be-
Yeah,
I ain't
but-
messing with
but
nobody
this
in
is
no
pretty-
mask.
well,
If you
I
got a
mean,
If
mask
I've got
over
an
the
adult
knife, brother,
person
get
walk
outta
up to
here.
me in a mask, I ain't
Hey,
fooling with them
Don't get
people.
me. Don't get me wrong. I love slasher movies, but the horror movie genre is so much
See,
bigger
a horror
than
movie,
slashers.
to
is
me, it's got to
vast.
be something paranormal, something. You're probably right. Let me back up.
Because,
Let me back up.
I mean,
Maybe Jaws and
psychological
maybe
horror.
Godzilla is horror.
You got
Aliens.
creature
Psychological-
features. Yeah.
So what do you call? So
psychological
what do you
horror
call King
is one of
Kong,
my.
Bryson? What do you call King Kong?
Well, that's not horror.
That's a creature feature.
That's a creature feature. I mean, if Godzilla is going to be horror, then King Kong has to be because them two dudes fight.
I'm scared of apes.
Look, you throw me on an island with a giant ape.
I mean,
out
I'm not
here
gonna
crunching
argue about that, but
redstone.
You're telling me you're gonna be
That'd be
afraid
scary.
of like a 60-foot
Okay.
gorilla?
So what
I
it
will bow
sounds to
down to
me
that,
like-
Bryson. Creature feature. I agree. I'm going to change my
So
stance.
what it
on that.
sounds to me like is the 1950s is taking the number 6 spot.
That's
right?
what-
no,
okay,
no, no,
that's
okay,
exactly
okay,
what it
hold
said.
up, hold
no,
up.
no,
Hold up,
no,
hold up, guys.
no,
Okay,
no one said
hold
that.
up.
No,
we're
there's
we're
no
at-
way that the
we're at num-
1990s can drop from the third spot all the way down to 7 and 8.
We
I mean,
have
come
to
on.
put the
Dude,
90s,
the 90s is going to be
at
dead
number
last
6.
if I've got anything to do with it. That decade
We got
sucks.
the
sucks.
90s at number 6.
Corky's
I have the
90s at
50s at
number
number
6.
7 on my
Hey,
list.
listen,
well,
I can remember distinctly living through the 90s and wondering where are the horror movies because there was none coming out.
They were
So,
there.
all right.
Leprechaun.
I
I'm
can
not.
already tell you. I can already tell you it's the old dudes against the young dudes.
Yeah.
And we've got the tiebreaker, Bryson, because he's right in the middle. Now, showdown.
There's no debate to be. No,
Brent,
this is how we did the last
no,
time.
wait a minute. Wait a minute.
You're following into his trap. You're falling into his trap.
No. Look, I'm saying you give me your top 3 90s movies, and I will give you my top 3 1950s movies, and my top 3 1950s movies will be better than your top 3 90s movies.
It won't even be close.
I know.
You ready?
Okay.
You ready?
Okay. Let's hear him out. Let's hear him out, guys. I want to hear this.
All right, Brent,
you go
go.
first.
What's your top 3?
All right. Silence of the Lambs, Blair Witch Project,
Okay.
and Scream.
That's strong,
All right.
dude.
It's
I know.
strong. It's strong.
That's a strong case.
Now.
Now,
You-
now
you
Dad's
may-
gonna throw
you
out the
may
ball.
hate You may hate it. You may hate it. All right, you may hate it. But I've got 3 people that's been in 3 movies that if you didn't have these 3 people, you wouldn't have horror today. Okay?
Okay, so you're not
Number
even saying
1.
movies anymore. You're just throwing out
Hold
actors.
up.
What are you doing? What's your strategy here?
Hold up. So, what I've got, okay, one of my, I'll go ahead and kick one of my movies out, okay, because you will say it's not strong enough, and that was The Creature from the Lac Lagoon.
Look,
Okay?
I love the creature, dude. Like,
I
that
love
dude is
it,
awesome.
okay? But you say, okay, it's not strong enough. House on Haunted Hill with Vincent Price. Vincent Price is horror, okay? It don't even have to be House on Haunted Hill. It could be The Tingler. It could be anything that
House of
Vincent Price
Wax.
was in. It could be the House of the Fall of Usher. Anything that Vincent Price was in the 50s, you're not going to beat that, okay? And that's just Vincent Price. Then you move
Amen.
on. Then you move on to The Horror of Dracula. This is the beginning of the Hammer films, okay? The Hammer films were huge in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Christopher Lee was Dracula for the first time in The Horror of Dracula. You do not get higher than Christopher Lee as Dracula unless you're talking about Bela Lugosi, okay? Christopher Lee was Dracula more than any other actor in Hollywood, and he killed it every single time. That's just 2 of them. You know,
Okay,
you
so
want to look at
that's a
go
good
ahead,
case,
go ahead,
Daniel.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say you made a good case
No,
there,
No,
and so we
not
can
really.
keep.
No.
So we're gonna
not really. That wasn't
let's
that
think
good
about
of a
it.
case.
Let's think about it. So what we'll
Can-
do is because
can I
it's
throw
controversial,
in-
we'll do a majority vote here. Okay,
Well,
Bryce, go ahead.
So, Bryson will say something.
I wanted to go best of both worlds. I wanted to join the 90s side and the 50s side, and let's bring them all together, because it was hard for me to choose. Even though the 90s got number 3 for me, but that's beside the point. We're past that. That's in the past. But if you were to look at the 1950s, you do have War of the Worlds, Creature from the Black Lagoon. I love the creature. You've got the original Fly, which brings us to Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. I love that movie. But you've got House of Wax, House on Haunted Hill, and you've got Village of the Damned, Carnival of Souls. And I will say, the tiebreaker for me, because there's some great 90s movies. I've spouted them out like 3 times already because I love it. My tiebreaker, if we're going to consider Godzilla a horror movie, would have to be Godzilla. That's my boy. I've watched Godzilla. I remember me and my dad sitting down and watching old black and whites and popping popcorn, and like,
Okay.
Godzilla movies for me has such a place in my heart that if we are going to add him to the list of horror,
Look at Daniel's
that
grin.
would be my tiebreaker from the
Now, wait a
50s to the
second.
90s.
I saw Daniel
Well,
grin as soon as you brought up Godzilla.
Now let's wait a second here for just a second. So let's just say
We've
just
only
say
got
that the
8
90s
minutes. We've
So
only
let's
got
say,
8 minutes.
Let's say the 90s isn't let's say the 90s isn't it, okay? So whatever, the Dad and Corky hate the 90s, so it can't. The 1950s still doesn't, like, to me, the 2020s is better than the 1950s.
So
That's controversial.
Oh.
we've only got 8 minutes, and
Deals
Bryson
right
come in with the
on.
tiebreaker.
I
Bryson
think,
come in with the tiebreaker.
in my opinion, I think after hearing the Godzilla argument, because that's huge. Probably the 50s at 6, and then the 90s at 7. Can we agree? We gotta stop pushing the 90s back because we love the 90s.
I'll give
The younger
guys
guys.
97th place.
Okay.
I'll
And
give
I'll say that the
97th place.
40s just needs to be
Because of
last
Scream,
place,
I will
period.
too.
Yeah,
I
I put
have
the 40s as last
I have
place.
the 40s as last. I will say that right now. I do have the 40s
Yeah.
as last. Okay. Are we?
The
So-
40s.
What do y'all think?
The problem with the 40s, the problem with the 40s is they were kind of running off the coattails of the 1930s. It wouldn't do anything new. It was just kind of
Yeah.
continuation of the 1930s, and so nothing. And don't get me wrong, I love the Wolfman. The Wolfman, besides Frankenstein, the Wolfman is my favorite Universal monster. But the 1940s just wasn't doing anything really any differently than what the 30s was, and it was just kind of a continuation. And because of that, yeah, I'll put it
Yeah.
in last place.
I'll
Okay.
agree. There's not much. I'm looking at the
So-
movies from the 40s now. There's not much there other than the
So,
Wolfman.
Yeah, we've got obviously we've got the number 10 spot being the 40s, and I'll just catch everybody up real quick, and then we'll finish our final spot. So first place got the 70s, we go to the 80s. Third place we got the 30s. Fourth place we got the 60s. Fifth place we got 2010s. Shout out Hereditary. Sixth place we got the 50s. Seventh place is the 90s. Now we got 8 and 9. I'm
right.
proposing 8
I,
as the 2000s and 9 as 2020s.
I want to flip.
I will-
the 2020s.
I will second that.
2020s and
I will second that,
2020s
and
2000.
I'll second
and
that.
I have my reasons. I have my reasons that I'm seconding what Cade's saying. My reasoning is, the 25, 20s, 2020s,
Yeah.
whatever the most recent movies are, have got away from horror. Okay, you do have your psychological stuff. Movies like Civil War, very psychological. It makes you feel creepy. Okay,
You know, I've
but
never seen that.
you
I need
start-
to check that out.
I need
It
to
is
watch
very
Review it on the
good.
channel.
I'd love to.
Which
But
review
you
it on
start
channel.
getting into movies like Clown in a Cornfield. You start getting into movies like the haunted swimming pool movie, whatever that crap was, and these movies start making
Night
fun of
Swim.
themselves. Okay, so and that's kind of the going thing right now. Okay, everybody wants to go to a horror movie, but they also want that comedy in there too, and
Right.
everybody likes to laugh at it. To me, that's not horror. So I would rank to the 2000s above the 20s. But
So I
that's
will
that's
say,
mine.
I've got a lot of hope for the 2020s. I mean, me and Donna, we just watched Weapons last night. I don't know if y'all
I
have seen
love
Weapons.
Weapons.
it's a
I
good-
love
it's a good
Weapons.
movie.
Loved that movie. That
Sick
movie was
Sick
awesome.
movie.
They've got some
The-
really cool movies out here in this new decade, and we're only 5 years in. We've got 5 years
Yeah.
more to go.
Right.
I think
Right.
that they're going to come out with some more stuff. But what I'm going to say, and I hate to bring up another tiebreaker, but if you were to look at the 2000s versus the 2020s, the fact that the 2020s is not done yet, I'll have to give it to the 2000s. They had an entire decade to bring us some awesome content. I mean, you've got Let the Right One In, Pan's Labyrinth, Shaun of the Dead. You got Cabin Fever,
Shaun of the Dead,
Zombieland,
yeah.
28 Days Later,
I love
The
that movie.
Descent, House of the Devil, Paranormal Activity, 1408, Planet Terror, The Ring, Red Dragon, and American Psycho. I've got to give it.
That's
Good
exactly
point.
what
Yeah,
I
I
was
can
going to
agree.
say.
I can agree with
well
that.
said, well said, Bryson.
I'll-
well said.
Yeah.
All right,
Well said.
We'll go with that. We'll go with that. So what we got, Cade? Run it down for us.
Yep. All right. From the Remember That podcast, this is our definitive list of the decades, start from the 1930s. So, number 1, we got the 70s. Number 2, we got the 80s. Number 3, we go back in time to the 30s. Number 4, we got the 60s. Number 5, we got the 2010s. Number 6, we got the 50s. Number 7, finally, we got the 90s. Number 8, we got the 2000s. And then number 9, 2020s. And then last but not least, obviously, we talked about Wolfman here, the 40s, and number 10 spot. So that's our ranking, guys. That was really
I
fun.
think it's a good list.
I think that's pretty
enjoyed
accurate.
The
that.
What do you
90s
guys
should be
think?
90s should be
I
higher,
I
but
think
it's a good list overall.
yeah, I think after Bryson brought up Godzilla, honestly, that kind of switched me from the 6th and 7th spot from
Yeah,
the 90s. I didn't
yeah.
think about that.
When Bryson broke down the monster, what was it called? Monster what? Creature feature.
Creature
Yeah,
feature.
it kind of made me think a little bit there. So that
He's
changed my mind on some stuff.
he's got the knowledge up here,
professor
man. We
changes
needed him.
lives.
We
That's
needed
his
him for
job.
this.
That's why
I know.
we
He's
hired
gotta
him.
get us intact.
I know.
That's right.
Yeah.
The professor,
awesome.
I'm telling you, he's the only person that won me over. Dad, you were throwing out movies for Bryson did a way better job at pitching the 50s than you did.
That's so funny.
Are you talking about my original breakdown, or are you talking about when I was trying to, sway everybody?
When you were
Well,
trying
listen,
to sway.
when it comes to the
We-
50s, you got 2 words, Vincent Price. That's enough. You know what I'm saying?
Vincent Price, right there. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it
That-
doesn't
that-
get any better than Vincent Price.
Hey, the one thing I think we can all agree on is you really can't go wrong with watching a horror movie from any decade. So
I
the best
agree.
horror movies from all of the decades, they're going to be good regardless.
Yeah.
So,
Well said,
there's
well
some
said,
great
dude.
movies from all of the decades. So
Well, you heard
Oh.
it first. Remember that.
Yep. That's it, man. That's
the
how we rank 'em.
1970s, the best.
Yeah.
the
That's right.
best horror
1970s is the
decade.
I
best.
totally
dude.
agree with that. And I challenge anybody listening to this right now. Give us your list. How would you rank the decades, man? And let's see how they compare to ours.
Yes. And
Throw it
everyone,
in the comments. Tell us
Yes,
why
please.
we're wrong.
Yeah,
please
tell us why we're
comment
right. Tell us
Alien
why-
is a horror movie and tell Corky he is wrong.
You know what? We're
Please,
gonna set
everybody.
a poll up on the Remember That Facebook page
Can you-
as soon as I go to bed. In a minute.
Yes.
We're gonna
Please
set a
do.
poll
Everyone,
up,
please.
and I'll probably
Everyone, please tell Corky that Silence of the Lambs, Jaws, and Alien are horror
Are horror
movies.
movies.
Please
Yes.
let him know.
All right, you know what? That's a debate for another podcast, guys, man, and we will debate that because I'll take it to my grave, especially Silence of the Lamb and Aliens. There's just no way. But having said that, man, we appreciate everybody tuning in to us. Give us your rankings. Let us know what you thought about the show. If you liked us doing this kind of stuff, let us know, and we'll keep doing stuff like this. Anybody else got anything to add?
I've said my piece, brother.
Yes, sir. Me too.
All right. We'll get on out of here. We'll see you. Bye.
See you.
See
Bye.
ya. Bye.
See you. Bye.
Yo, we rolling deep, let's dive into the fright. Hit that play button, we review every bite. From horror flicks that give you chills at night to games that thrill, yeah, we get it right. Remember that, step back, hold tight. We'll dissect every scare, keep the vibe right. Remember that, we're here to expose the thrills, the chills where the dark wind blows. From pixels on screens to the sound that glows. Join us forever, that's how the story goes. Now let's talk beats, we break down the sound. From underground hits to the mainstream crown. Music that moves, lifts you off the ground. Tune into our rhythm, let the passion rebound. Let's reminisce, before we fight. From underground hits to the mainstream crown. Let's reminisce, every song, every fight. We'll vibe through the shadows, shining our light. Remember that, we're here to expose the thrills, the chills where the dark wind blows. From pixels on screens to the sound that glows. Join us forever, that's how the story goes. So plug in, we're on this ride tonight. Remember that, keeping horror in sight.